following program on Ada Derana 24 is classified for general audience. It is intended for all ages. It contains little or no violence, no strong language, and little or no sexual dialogue or situations. The following program contains opinions of the participants and does not reflect the views and beliefs of the Derana Media Network. The network believes in a safe space for all ideas to be expressed and on its duty to create such a platform for free speech. Viewer discretion is strictly advised. From Studio 24 in Colombo, for a real view, real opinion, and for an honest conversation, it's time to get real with Mahieash Johnney.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Get Real, where we bring you notable newsmakers here at home and also from abroad, around the world, anywhere. If they make news, we bring them to you somehow right here in this program. Now, today, I want to speak to our nation's opposition, because in order to understand what exactly they're proposing for us as a nation to come out of the crisis that we are currently in, if you have an idea to you are entertaining in your mind to say that apparently no, Sri Lanka is now perfectly okay, we are going on the right track, well, you got to think again, because it doesn't look like that. Put your hand, I've been telling this fact quite often, put your hand into your pocket and see whether can you last this entire month with the salary or your earnings. If the answer is no, then you have to ask the question, why is it the case? So in order to pick the brain of the opposition, I've invited parliamentarian Eran Wickramaratne to the program. Welcome to the program. Good to see you. I mean, we have had conversations in other programs, but the last time you were here, you were the State Minister of Finance, and now you are joining me as a member of the salvaging Balavegi. I want to start off with the economy, of course, because you have a lot of information and know-how on that particular field. Now, parliamentarian, right now, the current government has opted to go with the IMF, and basically the IMF plan is what's being enforced in this country. We saw this plan, a similar plan like this, from 2015 up until 2019 when you guys were in power. Now, my question to you is, I know you all are criticizing right now with regard to the way the government has handled the issue with the IMF. What would be different in case, because at the time that you all were there also taxes were high, it was unbearable for people to go through day-to-day life. Right now it's the similar case, because as soon as the IMF comes in, this is what happens. So I understand you all learned from what you all had. Right now, what are you proposing that is different for what you all did from 2015 to 2019?
Thank you, Mahieash, for inviting me to be on the program. And just to go straight into the question, is that Sri Lanka has been, in a sense, going downhill for quite some time.
Yeah.
And one measure of that is the budget deficit, right, has never, been really seriously tackled. There has been a primary surplus, that is where income is more than expenditure when you leave out financial cost. Only about 5 times in our history of that, 2017 and 2018 were 2 years in which we were able to actually have a positive primary balance. That means where income is more than expenditure. So the problem has been coming, but people haven't really addressed themselves to actually tackling it. As we know, in the 1990s, we had early 90s or late 80s, we had revenues of more than 20% of GDP. When we took over, it was 10% of GDP. So this crisis has been building. So we took the steps. You're right, we increased taxes. Because we took the revenue from nearly 10% of GDP to nearly 13% of GDP. So it was positive, it moved in the right direction. We increased the taxpayers' net. There were less than 700,000 tax files in the Inland Revenue Department. We brought it to about 1.7 million tax files. So the net had to be increased, and we did that. Right at the outset, I need to say I need to disagree with you on the cost of living. The cost of living was the lowest. Inflation was at the lowest possible point. If you look at New Year that year in April, it was very, very, very low. People didn't grumble about it, and also people didn't grumble about the interest rates, because you could go and get a lease, for example, or a loan at 9%, 10%, 11%, 12%. Right? Now you are talking about 25%, 30%, 35%, and so forth. Inflation, 100% food inflation after this crisis, and general inflation nearly 70%. So there was a difference. We were going down a particular road, looking at the macro picture and trying to correct it. Then, of course, election came, and as usual, you go around the country making promises. Promises were made, we bring down the taxes, so forth, so forth. And we all know the consequences. The revenue just drastically fell, right, nearly by 1/3. Country went bankrupt. Now, to correct it, we kept saying right through that the then government should actually go to the International Monetary Fund. Now, when you go to the International Monetary Fund, what it does is the International Monetary Fund doesn't solve your problem. The International Monetary Fund, if you come to an agreement, they will look at our fiscal indiscipline and they will suggest disciplines. And if you have that agreement in place, then you send a signal to the market that you are financially disciplined and putting the policies in the right direction. That's what it actually does. It's not so much the money that the IMF gives you. It's more the market signal. That's very, very important. For 2 years in opposition, we kept shouting, saying, go to the IMF, get this done, because you can't. And then, of course, the then government put alternative arguments and alternative fallacious economic theories like we can print money, the economy will grow, and all this kind of nonsense, and we see the consequences. Then finally they go to the International Monetary Fund, and we are not opposed to that, because we had been saying, go to the fund, and we have been saying that. So we are not opposed to, in principle, right, agreements and arrangements with the International Monetary Fund. Budget deficit should come down, primary balance should be a positive, revenues should go up, so there's a fiscal consolidation program. We are not opposed to that. One of the weaknesses is it doesn't talk about expenditure. So it looked only at the revenue side, not the expenditure side, and that's something that needs to be looked at in the future. Then the other positive I would say about the program is this is the first time that in IMF program that they have actually said that Sri Lanka's problems are bigger than just fiscal consolidation. It's to do with governance issues, it's to do with corruption and so forth. Sri Lanka is the only country in Asia which has been in a program where this has actually now been documented and mentioned. In the original report that came, certain clauses were there, I think 205, 206, 207, it talks about specifically about corruption, and corruption in the revenue authorities, inland revenue, in customs and so forth, and saying that these need to be corrected. So the government has gone down this route in principle, right, and trying to correct that deficit. And we are the people who actually force this regime to change and go down that road. Where the disagreements come in certain areas, where the disagreement comes in, you need to get the revenues, but you need to put the taxes up. But this is an example I'm using. Whom do you get the taxes from? That's an important thing. Because people at the bottom of the pyramid, if you take the population as a pyramid, low income earners, are already pressed, really, really pressed. And the reason they are pressed is because the inflation went up. When the inflation goes up, the cost of goods and services is up. Even though inflation slows down, which it has done, and that's quite successfully done, right? But there is
no deflation.
That's right. But there is no, that's right. The cost of the thing doesn't necessarily come down. You see, so you have high cost, and your incomes have remained at the same place, right? So if you look at it, taking government departmental statistics, a family will need about 65, 67,000 a month to basically get the basic calorie requirements. Others are now, private institutions are computing it, and more like 85,000 is needed to do that. I would say 75% of the people in this country probably earn less than 50,000.
Yeah.
So you can see immediately there's a problem.
That's my argument. Now, when y'all were there, I think it was the 16th time the IMF was into this, we went into the IMF with that particular program and we entered it. And this is the formula they continuously give. Increase taxes, increase the revenue, and make sure that your books are in order. But that is necessarily, like you initially said, that the IMF is not going to fix your problems, but they do fix it for the creditors. They don't fix it for our nation or the people. Don't you see parliamentarian, at least, you know, as a party that is basically proposing to take over the governance of this nation in the future, don't you see that particular mechanism? Because the IMF is basically telling you, you have a loan here which you got to pay. Here is a little bit of more money, because that particular market guarantee that allows us is to borrow money. So our debt ratio continuously goes up. And this country coming, that particular tagline of debt-free nation is never going to happen if we continuously go down this path. So what is the alternative that you all can come up? Let's slowly decrease the amount that we are owing to the rest of the world and increase our revenue, because that is where this concept of being, you know, self-sufficient and economically self-sufficient comes into play. Now, nobody is giving us a crucial, credible plan in order to get to that point. So that's basically my question to you. What can the SJB do in order to get us to that particular point? Isn't that the point that we should get?
Yeah, but Mahieash, I like to start somewhere else on what you said. You sound to me typically Sri Lankan.
I am.
Yes, but
I am.
Yes, you are, and I think some of that we need to change. And I'll tell you, there are positives in being that, and there are negatives in being that, in the thinking. For example, right, you know, I don't care whether it's the IMF. We just need to follow right policies. Sri Lankans, what I meant by that is often we try to blame somebody else. We have an economic crisis, we are looking to point our fingers somewhere else. We have had in this country an ethnic conflict, we are trying to point our fingers somewhere else. We never come to terms with the fact that we are to blame for the crisis we have.
Absolutely.
And that we need to sort it out.
You are proving my point. You are proving my point. Because what I'm trying to say is, the solution lies with us, not with the IMF.
Yes.
And why isn't any of the political parties in the parliament is proposing a solution other than the IMF? Now, you said it could be...
Yeah, no, it's nothing to do with the IMF. What I'm trying to say is that we must stop portraying that we are in a problem because of the IMF. We don't have to go into the IMF.
No.
We don't have to go to the IMF. Countries that are managing the economies well don't go there. So when they come up with a program, right, what they are saying is you messed it up because you have a budget deficit, you have no primary. If you have a company, you say, you take your company, right? I mean, every day, if the expenditure is more than the revenue, the company can't survive. There's a problem. Country is the same, right? And then the directors of the company get together, they put a strategy, a plan, and they really work it out to make sure that this company is sustainable. Country is the same. Now, when we don't do it, right, what happens to international markets?
I agree with that, parliamentarian. I fully agree. Right now, we have beggars cannot be choosers kind of situation is where we are right now. But what I'm asking you is, for the future, the Samagi Janabalawegaya is our country's main opposition. So there is a high chance in the next general election you can form a government. Okay. So in a scenario like that, what I'm asking you in the future, let's forget about the past. It's screwed. Okay, and it's flawed. Right now, what I'm asking is, how are we as a nation getting to that point of self-sufficiency? You said clearly that the nations who are okay with their financial system doesn't go to the IMF. How are we getting going to get to that?
So now we are in the crisis, right? And as I said, right, having the program with the IMF, which this government has, is good because it gives a signal to the market that you are disciplining yourself financially and so forth, which is good. Now, and we have to then take that program forward, right? And we have to basically show it. Now, so as I said, good policies we should follow anyway, right?
Yeah.
And that's where sometimes the debate comes. So, for example, why we got into this crisis is because the central bank was dictated to. Now they brought a law to make the central bank more independent. Now we think that the present law is better than the law that used to be there. So it's independent, but it needs to be accountable. And accountability, we had some issues because we wanted more accountability by the central bank. There are some issues, but still it's better, right? I'll talk of the positives. We brought an anti-corruption law, right? Recently, we had a long discussion for government and opposition and everything. And long discussion, I can't remember the number of amendments, about 80 amendments, and the minister agreed, and it was passed. So it's a better law. Now, there is a discussion in Parliament this week on bringing an online safety law, right? And what was gazetted, we are totally opposed to. Again, we're totally opposed to it because one is it violates some of the fundamentals. Right? For example, it violates some of the principles of expression, right? Freedom of expression and all. We are in principle agreed that you can't have a situation where anybody can do anything on the media and get away. That we are agreed. So you need a law. And online safety laws, dozens and dozens of countries have. So we want the best law. In principle, we are agreed. But the law that has been presented, we are opposed to, because the law that has been presented, basically, it makes it a criminal offense rather than a civil issues, right? It was originally, where it was gazetted, showed that there were quasi-judicial powers given to a commission appointed by the president and all. Now, after going to the judiciary, the Supreme Court, about 31 amendments have been proposed, and I understand from the amendments that some of those issues have been addressed. That means in terms of the constitutionality of the bill, right? But there are lots of other things that have still not been addressed. The industry, and I'm talking about the communications industry, the media industry, have lots of reservations, and they have actually made proposals to the minister, right? Now, from my understanding is the minister is also in principle agreed that those amendments should be there. But those amendments, the Attorney General rules that we can't accommodate them because this has gone, the earlier bill has gone to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court had determined it. If we accommodate them, then we are basically have to go back, and therefore it cannot be done. So what's obvious there is, right, that this bill is flawed, and what should be done is it shouldn't be rushed, because the story is that 2 days of Parliament, prorogation of Parliament, a new sitting of Parliament. What should be done is, really government should do it, is take it in the other sitting of Parliament and maybe have the discussions, bring industry into the discussions as well, and include all those amendments that they are talking, or compromise on them, and get everybody involved, stakeholders as well as members of the opposition in Parliament through the parliamentary process. And I think if we do that and a bill is presented, even if you let the bill 2 more weeks that anybody wants to go and challenge it in court, allow that as well, by March you will have a new bill which probably is voted by everybody in Parliament as an accepted bill. And the reason I was saying this is, right, to turn the country, first phase with IMF is stability, then you have to go into the growth phase, right? To turn the country around, you have to have really a program, and you have to have the basis for it. Now, why am I saying even about this bill? The reason I'm saying about it is, it's to build confidence. If the social media platforms internationally have a problem with this, Sri Lanka is a small island. We have to be connected to the rest of the world, right? And these social media platforms are important. We have to reason with them, and we have to come to some arrangements with them. Other thing is, our future, Mahieash, in terms of our living standards, basically rests with our ability to conquer global markets. Our market is only 22 million. Our subcontinental market is nearly 2 billion as opposed to our 22 million. Our living standards depend actually on conquering that market, i.e. exports have to take primary place. Exports have to take primary place. So our internal policies should be geared also for exports, right? So I'll give you an example. If we are talking about the information communications technology industry, right?
Gold mine.
Gold mine. Exports, right? Now, if we are talking about, let's say, woodwork, right? Because I represent a constituency also who does woodwork, right? Now, there are limitations. Can be done, but there are limitations. Information technology is far bigger opportunity. It's to do with really the use of technology. So exports will need to be given its primary place. So in our program, so creating the environment. Now, if you go ahead with this bill, right, and if there are concerns, right, now I remember when the textile industry came, there were human rights concerns. Example, I was a banker then. I had to visit factories and to certify that the working conditions for women were accepted in international standards. I had to certify it. That's a human rights issue, right? Because people, when you use the word human rights, think about the war or some conflict like that. No, this is about workers, because people buying a dress or something in a market somewhere want to make sure that it has been done properly. So the environment, we have a program as Samagi Jana Balawegaya, and we are looking at the macro environmental issue, and I have lots of specifics I can tell you about.
Indeed, I mean, that's where I wanted to ask, because there is, I mean, as much as we can learn from the past, there's no point in talking about it anymore, because we've talked a lot parliamentarian. It's just that we need a plan for in order to hit hard and hit right for the future, and that's my point of conversation with you, where I wanted to know what the Samagi Jana Balawegaya brings into the table, rather than another round of fake promises and yadila, all those kinds of things, because we've got that, and that ended up in 2022. So if we can't learn from that and proceed, and then there's a bigger problem in our political system. Let's take a short commercial break. I'm in conversation with parliamentarian from the Samagi Jana Balawegaya, Eran Wickramaratne. A lot more to talk about, especially about the elections, what exactly is going to happen. You're watching Get Real. We'll be right back. To Get Real, I'm in conversation with SJB parliamentarian Eran Wickramaratne. We've been having a very candid conversation about what the SJB can bring to the table in order to fix the issues that we are undergoing. The current government has opted to go with the IMF. Apparently, it looks like there is unison in terms of the fact that we had to go to the IMF. But then again, solution lies with how Sri Lanka can basically take care of itself rather than banking on other nations in order to stand up, basically. We were at in 2022, we were at a place where we couldn't even get our basics. So obviously the system, do you all agree, parliamentarian, the system we were having didn't work for this nation? And from that particular point on, are you all suggesting a different one? Because we all know 2024 is an election year with either presidential or general. Last time, one of the programs when you were here, you specifically said, do not look at the person, look at the team. And what exactly is the SJB team can bring that will take Sri Lanka from whatever right now, economically, to a place where we don't have to beg anymore?
Yeah, so building the confidence of investors is going to be important. So to do some specifics on the anti-corruption thing, is we are advocating that we create an independent public prosecutor. So for example, we've had so many convictions in the courts in the last 3 or 4 weeks, which we haven't even previously seen. But then some of those things need to be further taken down, and what you have now is the Attorney General is also the prosecutor. Advisor to the government, also prosecutor. We are saying no, have an independent public prosecutor, so that governments might come and go, but that process will continue. Then another thing that we will do, which will, talking of corruption, is people complain often about going to the revenue authorities and having to pay, whether it's customs, inland revenue, or whatever. Digitization is one. We tried it in 2018-19, it was slow. These people are still struggling with it, and it needs to go forward. But I'm going further now and saying that we will have a central revenue authority. In other words, the departments will have their work, but in terms of actually collecting of it, and these are not things that are fallen from the sky. Lots of countries have done these things in taking them forward, reducing corruption, interaction between officials and those who are actually paying. So Central Revenue Authority.
Digitizing basically takes the corruption part.
Yeah, that's right. Digitizing and then putting it into one place. Then another issue that comes up often is, particularly with investors and people who want to manufacture, is that land has become an issue. So there is an idea, people are working in government, for example, if I work in the railway, I'm a worker there, I think the railway lands belong to me. If I work in the post office, I think the post office land belongs to me. If I work in the CTB, I think the CTB lands belongs to me. But these are actually common assets which had to be used for the country. So we will be looking at basically a central land bank also to establish it, so that we can actually speed up. Speed up is a question.
You're talking about lands, but there is a pile of sand that is next to the whole golf arena, still not being able to capitalize on it, and your government is, your previous government was very much responsible for the delaying of that. So what exactly do you all have in terms of the port city per se? There are lots of developments, but we don't see buildings there anymore. We don't see the so-called investors coming up and investing in that.
Yeah. So the port city concept is a little different. I mean, I oppose the port city right from the beginning, conceptually and economically, in terms of why is the country going that direction when there are other pathways for us to go. So the port city ultimately will succeed or fail if the macroeconomy is fixed and people have confidence in the country. Then those investors will come in there. But if you look at production and manufacturing and things like that, that will be not there. It will be the rest of the country. And therefore, that's why this land issue needs to be resolved and the land bank is needed. Then approvals processes, a whole lot of delays, and businessmen will tell you, that's why they're fleeing into other countries. They're saying it's basically, they can't be bothered with Sri Lanka. Then foreign direct investment, BOI is there, a lot of work needs to be done there, in terms of how do you speed it up. We'll have to look at the whole tax structure, and the IMF reports that specifically. What they're saying is create a transparent, open system. Don't have special things. We have the SDP law, then we have the port city law, then for others we have another one. Discretion is given, sometimes distributed to various different authorities, right? That needs to be basically taken out.
Taxation, when you're talking about taxation, a lot of questions that the people are asking. You said most of when you're talking about the pyramid in the social status in our country, its majority is middle income class all over. In a situation like that, they're taxed dry, but the top tier is getting a lot of breaks. How are you going to address that and make sure that, yes, investor-wise you need to in order to attract them, but then again, you can't dry the people of this nation, completely onto the ground in a position where they can't even, sustain their monthly salary. That can't be the goal at the end of the day. So how are you all addressing that?
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought that up, because clearly taxes have to be taken from people who can pay. And you have lots of people earning less than 50,000 and they just can't make ends meet. And so, taxes like the VAT have added to the cost of living, because lots of new areas have been brought in, so it goes from 0 to 18% straight away, and then 15% goes to 18%. So that for sure will have to relook. Taxes have to be increased, revenue has to be increased, but where do we get them from? So like Mahieash, you said, it is people who can pay must pay, and the International Monetary Fund in its first report itself said that we have to look at property taxes, wealth taxes, inheritance taxes. They don't use all these terms I'm using, but the concept is you take it from people who can give it. Now, I know people who won't like to do that, who likes to pay taxes, but then we are a government. We need to look at social justice, because I keep saying this, and I said this to the IMF the other day. You can have a program, but if you create social unrest and the cost of social unrest is greater than the benefits of the program, then what's the point of the program?
Absolutely.
You see, so I said that to them, and therefore, right, we certainly have to address that issue. We will have to look at that issue. We'll have to go to the details, certainly, of that issue.
The reason I'm asking this is a possible future SJB government is going to be an elitist government, that what we've seen, like giving so much of breaks and benefits to the upper class, and basically not look at the people who really need your support, which is the majority of this nation, and be an elitist government? Or are you all going to break away from that particular mold and try to address issues that will make living in Sri Lanka a enjoyable experience for its citizens rather than a miserable one?
Yeah, that's a good thing, Mahieash. The thing is, it's what's been sold in the country over decades. Now, I'll give you one example. People say state-owned enterprises must have government ownership. And then if you try to deal with it, they say, you're trying to sell the
national
assets. What's the truth of it? The truth of it is, if it's loss-making, the taxpayer, poor taxpayer, going to the polar, is paying for that. Not the elites. These poor people are paying for it. State-owned enterprises must be profitable. Otherwise, we should hand it over to people who can make it profitable. It can be local investors or foreign investors. That's how it should be. Protecting the poor, we believe in an open economy. We believe in strengthening the private sector. We believe in wealth creation. But we also believe strongly in protecting those who are vulnerable, social protection. That social protection, don't hide it under government employment and loss-making SOEs and all these other things which really deflate the economy. That should be directly given. So, for example, social protection to low income or to the poor or to the aging or to the sick should be directly given to them. So, we had some hard choices. One hard choice we will make is, right, they used to say haves and have-nots gap, the gap. Earlier they used to measure it in terms of income.
But
now
food.
Education, I would say, is one way to measure it, right? Because the gap is increasing. Because those who get into elite schools, whether government or private, they are exposed to technology. Others are not.
Do you believe that our education system is actually doing well for the nation? I mean, like, it is helping to grow people who are knowledgeable, or are we just getting people to memorize the syllabus and they're basically good people who can do tests, but miserable people in order to solve problems as per the nation? So do you think the education system is actually needs to be revamped from A to Z so in order to create a set of group of people that is coming out from that education system, free education per se, that will actually help to grow the nation rather than be a burden?
Yeah, so for sure, I would say this as Samagi Janabalawage, policy-wise, we are not putting it into hard infrastructure. We have limited resources, we're putting in soft infrastructure. Highways are not our priority. Education of children is our priority. So philosophically, that's a decision we have taken because we have limited resources. You are absolutely right that it needs a lot of reform. What you are saying, from rote education to really asking and getting children to begin to think, that issue is there. But that, Mahieash, is all internal reform. We are not only looking at internal reform. Reports have been written for the last 30 years on internal reform. I'm looking at seeing how we can attack the system from outside. I'll give you one quick example. Parliament appointed a committee on higher education, select committee, all the parties represented. I participated the most from this JB. We agreed on some principles. Spend on education must go up, every party agrees. It's less than 2%, 1.5, 1.7% of GDP. It needs to go to 3 and go up. All parties are agreed. We need to spend more on education. Secondly, we agreed the government can't be the only legitimate supplier of education. Private sector should be legitimate. Then non-government, non-profit distributing sector, like all the top universities in the world, should be legitimized as a supplier, not only government.
But who's going to monitor that?
Yeah, I'm coming to that. And then even allow international universities to set up here, right? This market is not just here, the whole subcontinent, we can open it too. And what's the role of the government? Role of the government is what you said, regulation, monitoring, quality is the role of the government. More than the supply, more than the teaching, that's the role of the government. So at the end of the 6 months, we had to sign a report. Vijayadasa Rajapaksa was chairman of that committee. When we signed the report, right, the member representing the NPP, right, didn't sign the report and gave reasons. So reasons were it weakened the existing system, etc., etc. One person came and told me, weaken the system. I said, what are you talking about? 17 universities in Sri Lanka government? They're already beyond 1,000 in the ranking, right? So what are we talking? They're already weak. So I'm not looking at internally just changing things. I'm looking at it, attacking it from outside for the betterment of our students, right? So we have to absolutely do this, and we had to go. Then one person came and told me a government lecturer might leave and teach in a private institution.
It happens.
I said, what's the problem? I said, mother has 5 children. One goes to a Sri Lankan State University. One goes into a private university. One goes into vocational training. One goes into professional training. For the mother, all children are the same. Every child's education is important. So what's the problem? If somebody leaves this and goes into a private university and teaches, they're still teaching our children. Otherwise, what's the option? They will go abroad for a higher income. And when we say it's a brain drain, so we need to change this. We need to change the thinking. We in Samagi Jana Balavegia, we have thought through this and we have a specific program. Unfortunately, right, some of those other parties are still hung up with the philosophy of the past. Even in education, they oppose private medical schools 30, 40 years ago, they opposed it 7, 8 years ago. They're still hung up with these things. We have to fundamentally change this. That's where we are going.
Agreed on that, parliamentarian, because I also strongly believe the problems that we have is because of the fact that we are just generating, like a factory people to come out of schools with A's, B's, but when you actually have a conversation with them, they're the dumbest people that you ever met in your life, because they don't they have not been given, you can't blame them, they have not been given the knowledge in order to have a good conversation that will benefit the nation or the path that they are as individuals would take. Let's take a short commercial break. More to discuss with SJB parliamentarian Eran Wickramaratne. This is Get Real with Derana. Welcome back everyone to Get Real. I'm in conversation with parliamentarian from the SJB, Eran Wickramaratne. Parliamentarian, we're running out of time very quickly. Everybody wants to know, is Sajith Premadasi your candidate for the presidential election? Because looks like it's going to be a battle between the current incumbent president, Eran Wickramaratne, and his party. I think it was deputy leader when they were together. So basically from the same pile of people. So how are you? Because what I'm trying to understand is your philosophy. How does it change from the United National Party? Because it is like your mothership when you broke away. So why should people select Sajith Premadasi over Eran Wickramaratne?
I must say it up front, we have no issue with the United National Party.
But
we actually, the MPs at that time came out to form the SJB, because as they went through the country, people said we need a change, we need a change. And from 1994, now it happens to be 30 years, the United National Party has not been able to get a presidential candidate elected. That's really the issue. So because of that, MPs...
Reason?
Reason is because it's really surprising that you had the same leader for 30 years. That generally in a democracy that doesn't really happen. I've been CEO of a bank and you perform and you give 3 years or whatever, and if you do well they'll say, hey, we want you to stay on. If you're not doing well, they'll come and just whisper in your ear and say, I think we need to get a new person, maybe you should start looking for something else, right? Now in politics, this doesn't happen. So on one hand, we have the family bandism issue. On the other hand, people find different ways of staying on. That shouldn't happen. So this is how it happened. This is how the SJB was formed. And as I said, the UNP and the SJB is not the problem, but there was a problem on the leadership, on the candidacy and all. And then what happened in the past is you always, otherwise you felt that you can't win, you bring an outsider and you put it in, and we did that a couple of times, in this thing. So I would say this upfront, there are no perfect leaders. I'll be very upfront about it. You look at it, going back in history, you look at it. People don't like to say it like that. Different people had different strengths. D.S. Senaka had certain strengths. Dudley Senaka had it. SWRD Bandaranayaka, right? Mahieash weaknesses also I can think about, right? Chandrika Sirimavo. And then if you look at now, if you look at the future as well, no perfect leaders. But I would say this about Sajith Premadasa, right? Sajith Premadasa hasn't accumulated personal wealth and robbed and stolen, from having lands to foreign bank accounts or anything like that, right? Sajith Premadasa is educated, right?
Are you to say your former leader has done that?
Former leader meaning who?
The current incumbent president?
No, I wouldn't say that of anybody who hasn't been actually convicted. He was accused. And the case hasn't gone forward.
You brought a point. Every leader has its strength. So if you look at 1994, Chandrika Kumaratunga came as a difference, from the UNP 17 years of rule and all that. And then we later on we had Mahinda Rajapaksa who promised to end the war, which he did. And then Maithripala Sirisena came saying end corruption, didn't happen. 2019, putting the country into didn't happen. Now this time the biggest topic is economy, getting the economy fixed. So is Sajith Premadasa the candidate to do that out of the lot?
Yeah, I would say yes, for two reasons. One reason is, if you look at our philosophy, we believe in open market, we believe in the private sector, we believe in wealth creation, and of course social justice. So we believe in a social market economy. And issues are complex, you see, and one person can't solve these issues. So therefore, you need to assemble a team, and you need to see what's the best team. And the team with experience, you need to have people with it. I emphasize experience first, right? There's no question that you need to look for people who are ethically, acceptable. That's for sure. But I say experience. So you need to have professionals, you need to have academics, you need to have people with experience people who have done something, people who have actually managed something. I mean, recently businessman Rohan Palliye, right, spoke at one of our meetings. I really admired what he said, how he built that business, right? It's really admirable. That's just being a supplier, right, to some companies, later directly selling to the original buyers and developing the technology and how it has moved forward. Now that's experience. Experience cannot be replaced. You need experience. Now we have lots of politicians who don't have experience. Experience is if you want a minus generally if you take Sri Lankan leadership. But then a good leader is not somebody who knows everything. A good leader is somebody who can assemble people together. And I think Sajith Premadasa has that. Have a conversation with him personally.
He's not coming to have a conversation.
Okay.
We've tried, but he's not coming.
Yeah. So I mean, people go, they meet him in business groups, professional groups, academic groups, and so forth, right? And he understands the issue, and he understands, right? And he also gets these professionals and academics and others to actually respond. And he's assembling a political team, right, which he knows. Issues are complex, and they need answers, right? A leader doesn't need to know all the details, but a leader needs to know, I have the people who can actually address it. I would challenge it and say to anybody out there, look at the alternatives and look at their experience, right? Apart from, destruction and, doing very crazy things in the past, but look at the experience and then make the decision and put it. We can't go back to making the same mistake we made some time ago.
Are you assuring the public saying that the SJB is not going to be Sajith Premadasa's party, for donkey's years to come?
No, of course not. Because, you know why I'm saying that? We walked out of the UNP. Those MPs are all there. We are very, very clear. We are very clear the reason we came out, right? And we definitely will back our leader 100%. That doesn't mean that we are going to back a leader that he is going to be there for his lifetime, because we walked out on that principle. And Syed Premadasa knows that himself, and he knows he has a mission, and I think in a 10-year period we can make a major change.
Very quickly, we are running out of time, parliamentarian. The youth, the second tier is what I'm asking of the SJB. If the first tier falls apart, do you have a strong, the reason I'm asking is because you're telling us to look at the team. So it is always, you have to have the plan, the backup plan, and a backup plan for the backup plan. So what exactly is the youth concept in your particular party? Because that's vital as well, just because, you need to grow people and then make them come to the platform. So what's with the SJB on that?
So there are two things. One is you need politicians who have experience. I came from the private sector, and sometimes in the private sector and you come to politics, you think I can run the country like the company, and you can't. So there's a learning curve for sure, even for people who come from the private sector, because there I just manage the P&L, the balance sheet, the liquidity statement, and here I have to manage people, and not only that, I manage caste, which I never really addressed myself to, race, religion, class, everything. So it's complex. So you need the experienced politician. Then you need the professionals, people like Harsha, myself. We came more from the professional line, and we came into this. You need them. We need now another set of professionals in the next election, which SJB must bring in, another set of professional experience. Senior professionals also need to come in. Then the youth, there are two ways. One way you can look at it is people come from the bottom and they grow up and they go into politics. The other is that people who are making a contribution, you see, and they are already making a contribution, maybe through innovation, maybe through successes in the business areas they're involved, the professional areas they're involved, and all. And SJB, we are very open to taking new people. And I must say this, even in the local elections that had got postponed, I've made some changes. I brought young people last time. I'm bringing new people this time as well. So we are very open to it, because we think that the world is advancing so quickly and changes are happening so quickly that those younger people are definitely needed. So I tell the young people that we have only two options. If you want to think like of 2048, I said form your own party, and in 2048 you will be in power. That's one route. You have 25 years, go that route. We are fully supportive. The others, I say, to the other young people, right, if you think you want to see changes much quicker, get into an existing party. This is what the SJB stands for. You are most welcome here, and we are willing to listen to you and go on this journey together.
Parliamentarian, I appreciate you coming on the show and actually having a conversation with me and being very open about it, and you got real. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Mahieash.
Well, that's all the time we have for you tonight. Thank you once again for watching. I'll be back again at 9:35 with World News. See you then. Bye.